Right, Dorico. Okay, here we go. So I'm going to share my screen so this all gets recorded as well. Okay, so basically, I'm kind of going to cover as much as I can, but I won't go into like infinitesimal detail. So I thought basically we could start from the kind of the process of importing MIDI, basically. So obviously when you do something, do you use Logic or?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So when you import from Logic, at least what I do is I make a kind of clean MIDI file. So I'll show you from this Logic project here. Okay, let's just skip all that. Okay, so this is not the cue to the film, as you can see, because it starts like exactly a bar one. And this originally was a strings and piano arrangement, so it had like a little introduction with strings to begin with, but it's also got like the MIDI I had for like a backup click track there. And I also tend to put like one note at the beginning and end, because sometimes Logic can be a bit buggy with ending it in the right place. So anyway, yeah, so that's the piano here. And then basically, as usually, you just export the MIDI like that. I did it earlier, so but this is the part everyone knows how to do already, so I'm just going to close that. So anyway, you end up with a clean MIDI file, which you can basically, that obviously will get sent to the studio like as a tempo map as well. But for Dorico, you import that basically for the notes, and also to make sure you have all the bars in the right place. So I kind of set up a template for this already, so it's already got some things kind of worked out, but not everything. And I'm going to go ahead and import that MIDI here. So as you can see at the moment, there's absolutely no music on there. But if you go to File, Import, MIDI, you can basically import any MIDI you like, and it should be able to recognize most of the instruments. Sometimes you have to change them if it doesn't know what it is. But if I go ahead and open this MIDI file, you can see here that it's got some tracks from the MIDI file. I don't need these two here, because those were the ones in my Clean Logic project that were like the click track and the like flags for the beginning and end. So you can untick those and just import the piano like this. Press OK. Okay, so there you have a bunch of music, right? So it's a very, very messy to begin with, as it would be in Sibelius. One thing with Dorico is it has these like five modes at the top: setup, write, engrave, play, print. Setup is basically where you handle like all the players and stuff. So if you want to add more players, if you want to, so flow's down here. Basically in Dorico, a flow is just a name for a movement of a piece. So if you have something like in multiple movements, you'll have separate flows for them. If you have something that's just one movement, you'll have one flow. So you can see here, this big blue rectangle is just representative of one flow basically, and you can add more here, but I don't need to. Write mode is where you write the music, basically. So this is where you will do any editing that involves changing notes, adding notes. All the music basically gets done in write mode. Engrave mode, which is this one here, is where you deal with everything that's to do with how the score looks, but not what's going on musically. So you won't be like adding notes in engrave mode. In fact, it doesn't let you. This is more for like fine-tuning your layout, deciding where the page turns are, if you want to move any dynamics, if you want to make the stave size smaller, change the like bracketing of the. It's especially useful for like a big ensemble thing. If you want to change the bracketing, you do that in engrave mode. Play mode is the one I probably use the least. You can kind of, some people have kind of said, oh, Dorico is getting good for like basically using it as a DAW, and I don't really think so. I think if you want to write film music, you can't really do it in Dorico. For my film projects, I only use Dorico for notation. I don't use it to score the film. It's just not built for that, really. I mean, if I go over to bar 8 here, so it kind of looks like a very basic digital audio workstation, but you can see here that it does show you kind of the automation here, but you can't do any serious mixing. And you can use VSTs with it, but again, it's not as flexible because you can't automate everything you want to automate as well. And you don't have access to like a lot of the plugins that you normally would in, like even the free ones like in Logic. You can't just pull up the Logic EQ or anything like that. So it's very limited in terms of what you can do. So the play mode sometimes can be useful for like, just if you want to just see the MIDI, just to see what it looks like visually. But other than that, I barely use it. And print is obviously just if you want to print it out. Okay, so as you can see, this looks like a disaster at the moment. There's a bunch of like tempo markings that aren't showing. There's a bunch of this. So this piece here, actually, it might help if I just quickly play the demo of it. Okay, so this has got a big gap at the minute because there's an introduction, but this is part of it. And you can see this MIDI looks way too crazy for what it sounds like. Basically, the problem with the MIDI at the moment, and this would be the same probably if you imported this into Sibelius, because Logic doesn't know which hand you want stuff to be in. It will kind of assign it automatically. And also, if you use pedal markings as well, it won't be able to put them in as pedal lines by default. So I'm kind of going to just focus on the first maybe 20 to 30 bars of this, just to show you some kind of basic MIDI cleanup to begin with. So this is just a piano at the moment. One thing you'll probably notice is that I've got the instrument name on the left on every system. That would be fairly normal in a large like ensemble piece or anything where you've got multiple instruments, that's where it's not like a small band, for example. Like if you were working with like a string quartet, you wouldn't need the instrument labels on every system, but if it's an orchestra, you kind of do. But you can disable this if you go into layout options. Okay, so layout options is, I actually can't even remember where you access it up here, but the shortcut I use is Command-Shift-L. Okay, so this will get you into a bunch of layout options. Hello. We have two people in real life, all right. So yeah, so layout options basically enables you to change stuff about the layout. For my recording session stuff, I have like a template, so 90% of this is kind of done already. But for example, if you need to change something like that, so for this one, if I wanted to get rid of the small label there, I think you go into you go into Staves and Systems, and then you'll see there's basically if you want to change something layout, you'll find there's an option somewhere. And honestly, like online, the Dorico like help pages are really useful because they just have everything on there. So you'll see I've got staff labels on the first system, and it says full, and then abbreviated on subsequent systems. So you'll see that the piano is got the full word and then it's piano, but I don't need that since it's just one instrument. So you can just tick none and then press apply, and then it will get rid of it for you. For a piano score, probably this needs to be a tiny bit bigger, the staff size. So again, you can do this in layout mode. And the staff size is in page setup here. So you can see I've only got it on 5mm at the moment, and this probably needs to be something like 7 or maybe higher. So I'm going to put it at 7mm there. And that for an A4 piano score is pretty good. Okay, so dealing with notes, note input. Okay, and by the way, on Dorico, you use Z and X to zoom in and out instead of like Command. You can also use Command and scroll wheel as well, but I prefer to use Z and X because it's just quicker. Okay, so editing notes. Okay, so this piano score here is an absolute mess at the moment, and you can see it's used like multiple voices where it just doesn't need to at all. Basically, for the entire way through this piano cue, it's just a left-hand quaver accompaniment. So you can begin to rewrite certain things. So for example, this D here, you can change to a quaver. And by the way, all these note durations have kind of shortcuts. So on the number keys at the top, 1 to 9, or 1 to 0 actually, you can get all these different lengths. Okay, so for example, if I press the number 5, that changes this to a quaver. And given that I've got the pedal in this piece, I can just leave it as a quaver. You can see it's changed this F here and it's put it in the right hand. And if I press Shift, whoops, sorry, didn't mean to do that. If I press Shift and N, I will go into note input mode. You can also press Enter, that does the same thing. So this will allow you to input notes. So if you just click around here, you'll see I'm not inputting any notes, because I need to be in note input mode. And I can just write the F in the left hand there. See, it's come out as a crop chip, so all I need to do is, select it, and why is it not working? Just check this. It's a bug. This sometimes happens. I'm just going to quit this. Sometimes it doesn't show you where your note is being selected, so I'm just going to restart it. Happens. Okay, right. Let's try that again. Hooray. Okay, there we go. That's what it's supposed to look like. It's supposed to look orange. Okay, so I can go ahead and change this to a quaver. I believe there was an A down here. And then this F. So what I just did there is I pressed Shift N, and if you select a note there and go into note input mode, you'll see that there's this thing here across the top, and that's called the rhythmic grid. So Dorico basically operates according to a kind of rhythmic grid thing. And you'll see at the moment the lines are basically on every quaver. Can you see that? You can actually change the resolution of this, they call it. So if I press Option and the square bracket button, with Dorico there's a lot of stuff that's kind of using like the Shift and Control and Command and arrow keys, stuff like that. So as compared to, for example, Sibelius, you'll be finding yourself using a lot of the kind of keys in the bottom left of the keyboard, because a lot of Dorico kind of works most effectively on shortcuts, basically. Okay, so you can kind of change the resolution of this, and basically what that will mean is you can go and input a note anywhere in the bar or in any staff. So if you want to go down a staff, you just press the down arrow on the keyboard. Same with this. And if you want to change the resolution of it, you can go to, I'm pressing Option, the square bracket here. So if I go all the way out, you'll see I end up just at crotchets. And basically what that will mean is if I move the arrow left and right, it will only skip the crotchet unless there's another note written, in which case it will go over all of them. The reason I was showing you that is because rather than me deleting this F and writing it in the left hand, you can just cut it and paste it like this. Okay. This is also still a mess, and the reason for that is because the way the MIDI has been inputted, let me just delete this F. Backspace is just delete, by the way. The way the MIDI's been inputted basically meant that it had to use two different voices to accommodate the notes properly. So you can just select that whole bar there and right click, and you'll get this menu here. And if you go down to voices and then change voice, you can force them all to go into one voice. So upstem voice 1 is just the default like voice. So it's just upstem voice 1, which would be the default anyway. And if you just press that, it will put it all into one voice there, and will get rid of all the rests from the other voice. So now that's fairly neat. And there was a slur in this. I don't think I want it, so we'll get rid of it. And this here, F, it's interpreted as being in the melody, but it's actually not. So this second bar is actually exactly the same, except there's an A at the end. So I'm actually just going to highlight these notes and press R, which will repeat them. Okay, and you've noticed it kept this D in the bass there, and that's because the D was in voice 2. So if you repeat something and it's in voice 1, if there's something already in the downstem voice, it will also keep it there. It won't delete it. but you can delete it just like that, and it'll be fine. And then I did have one extra A, whoops, 5. So I'm going Shift N, and then you can just press the letter on the keyboard, literally that's the note. Yeah?
Just found a shortcut that might help
Yeah, go on.
others out. So, for instance, if you wanted the two G's in like bar and 10, in the bar, in the bottom, in the left hand with the quaver pattern,
yeah.
it's like those G's. Turns out in note input mode, I don't know if it's true outside of note input mode, if you've got them selected, if you go Alt M, Alt M, no. Yeah, it'll put them into the stave below, because N and M is the one that sort of groups them.
Yeah, that's a good one actually, I forgot about that. Dorico has so many shortcuts and I can't remember all of them. So yeah, that's a habit I got into with the cut and pasting instead of shifting them. But you can also actually do a similar thing where if you ever have something that you want in, for example, if this was like the G an octave below, whoops, and you wanted to put that in the bass clef in the left hand, if you don't press Option and you just press M, it will do it like that. So it will do like a kind of cross up stave like that. That can be quite useful. And then if you want to shift something down an octave, it's just Option and Command at the same time. If you want to move a note down, it's Option and down. If you just press the down arrow on its own, it will flip between one staff and the other. So the whole thing is basically designed for you not to need to use the mouse, which is why it's using Option and Shift all the time. So I'm going to move this down to an A. Okay. I probably actually will only just use 2 bars of this because there's so much stuff. Okay, this slow line here, I don't really want it. And again, this F actually is part of the accompaniment, so that can go. And that can become a dotted quaver. Slows are obviously just interpretation. So I think in my original version, I had the quaver figure slowed. So what I'm doing there is I'm pressing the first note, holding down Shift and selecting the last one. So it selects the group of them, and then just pressing S. All of these shortcuts you can actually do by clicking on buttons at the side, but it's just way slower. Because obviously you've got some over here and some over here. So for example, if you wanted to do the same thing there, you could select all of the notes and press this button over there. But again, it's just quicker to, the faster you can learn all these shortcuts, the better, I would say. So again, with Dorico, it's not easier to use than Sibelius, I don't think. It requires a fairly good amount of time and experience just to get faster using it. The main thing I think is better about it is how it deals with anything involving layout. So in my opinion, it's much quicker at making very readable publishing / session standard scores, which people can read, and it doesn't take too much effort to do that. I'll show you some full orchestral stuff in a bit, which I would say is even more of an advantage of Dorico. With these tempo markings, some of them are hidden at the moment, so you can unhide them. This thing is called a properties panel here, and you can hide and unhide stuff there. What I tend to do is I just tend to delete it and just retype it. Sometimes when you import MIDI into Dorico, for some reason it basically doesn't, I think it does this in Sibelius too, it doesn't actually put the tempo markings up. So the way you input tempo in Dorico is you do Shift T, and this is a tempo popover. And then it's kind of a slightly Americanized way of thinking about it. So if you want something to be crotchet equals, you type Q, and then equals, like that. And the reason it's a Q is because it's short for quarter note. If you want a half note, you would put H equals, and if you want a whole note, you would put W. I know it's terrible.
This whole time I thought it was just because it looked like a...
I know, yeah, you'd be forgiven, yeah, exactly. But Q and then equals, and that was 78.
Yeah.
Okay, and then it gives you the tempo marking, right? If you have a tempo change, you can just do exactly the same thing, and I'm just going to write Q equals 79. I find for recording sessions, there's no point using decimals, really. If you have a big tempo change, I always put a double bar line as well. But for one like this, where it's basically, the only reason there's a tempo change there is because it's conforming to the picture. Right, I'm not actually I don't want to change tempo, that's just I have to line up with a specific frame. What I sometimes do, in fact, pretty much what I always do, and I should do this with the first one, is if I click on this first tempo marking and I open the properties panel, which you can find down here, or is also Command 8 as well. That's one shortcut I literally just remembered today. You can add text to the tempo marking over here, and I'm going to put open bracket -4. So if there's a tempo change, especially if it's a big one, I like to specify by how many BPM it is, just so the players can get an idea. And you also need to press this box saying text shown. In Dorico, there is some stuff like this where you'd think, okay, well, if I put text, obviously I want you to show it. So there are some things in Dorico where it's like you have to check 2 boxes to say yes to something. Again, that's one of the things that's not entirely perfect about it, but you'll see at the beginning there how I've got it at the moment. It's saying -4 before the tempo marking, and you want it after. So you just press metronome mark order, and it flips to having it before. So then the text ends up after that. Depending on whether you have like a template or not, the font size for this might be different. So you would have to go into library and then I think font styles and change the size of it. Yeah, exactly. So if you had to do that for every single score, that would be a pain in the arse, but I have a template, so it's all done for me, and it took me like a good while. I basically just the first recording session I did in Dorico, where I had to do all this stuff for the first time, I just basically deleted all the notes from it and the players and just saved it as a template. So that's smart. If you do Dorico for your first score, everything will be from scratch. You can make all the edits in terms of the font size, in terms of how you want the bar numbers to look as well, and then you can just save it as a template. I think one more thing I'll show quickly in this is how to get bar numbers in every bar. So at the moment, this looks basically like a classical score because I've only got the bar numbers at the start of the system, and they are not shown over every bar number, which they should be for a recording session. So again, this is in layout options, and you just go to bar numbers here. So it basically gives you a bunch of options. So you see at the moment it says every system, which is just every line. I want them to be on every bar. And it also asks you for the horizontal position, so where you want them in relation to each bar. So at the moment they're left aligned on the bar line, which means they're at the beginning of every bar. You can have them centered on the bar line, but for recording sessions I prefer them to be, and you can kind of do either of these as long as it's consistent. I've seen some recording session scores where they put them at the start of each bar. I prefer this one personally. And you can see now that it's put them on every bar, but for me that's not enough. I like to have them in boxes as well. So I go and I find something called enclosure type. Where is it? Here we go, enclosure type. So at the moment there's none. You can put them in a circle or rectangle if you like. I like rectangles, and so they look like that. So obviously the rest of this score is really, really messy. Sometimes you'll find when you do that the bar numbers, depending on if you have, for example, if I untick this box, you'll see that the bar numbers end up being all over the place. They basically glue themselves to the closest point of the staff. I hate that, so I always tick align bar numbers across the width of the system, which means that they will always be in a straight line, no matter what. And sometimes you also will get things like this, so showed bar numbers at X places. So sometimes it will not want to show you bar 1, or it will think if you've got a rehearsal mark, for example, if you're using a rehearsal mark for whatever reason in a recording session, maybe it's like a place where you want a clean take or something, it might omit the bar number from that bar. So I just basically just go ahead and tick all of these. So Dorico has a bunch of exceptions where it might not show a bar line. I just go and tick all the boxes. So it will definitely show them always. I think that's pretty much, one more thing, yeah, dynamics. Okay. Dynamics, I think, is probably the weak point of Dorico because it's basically the reason it does all these kind of things with involving the rhythmic grid is to basically avoid the score looking like trash. But it has its weaknesses, which means you basically sometimes have to kind of micromanage it a little bit. So if you want to input a dynamic, let's say for this piano, I use the dynamic popover. Again, you can do this by going to a menu and finding piano and clicking on it. But I prefer to just do Shift D, which gives you the dynamic popover, and you can type anything into this. So P for piano. If you want to add like an expression marking after, let's say Dolce, you can actually just type it like this. And you can also edit this as well. So for example, if you want to edit the text afterwards, you can again open the properties panel and you get all sorts of stuff. The properties panel is really useful for doing stuff like this. And you can see where I put Dolce, it's turned that into a suffix. So you can also add something, for example, that before the dynamic marking as well, but I want it after. So that's one example. For crescendos, generally speaking, what you will do is you'll highlight the range of the crescendo where you want it, and you will add it in. And the way you do this is like that, which is Shift, and then it's the this one. What's that called? I don't know. Yeah, arrow.
Less than.
Yeah, that's it. This sign. So the one that looks like a crescendo, and you can also do the same with diminuendo. It's just Shift and that. One weak point about Dorico is that if I try and do this in the middle of a note, it won't let me. Okay, it won't let me do it. Right, I'm trying to put a crescendo in there, and basically the reason that it does this is because of the way the program is made, is it doesn't know where to end that diminuendo. If you type in the dynamic, in fact you can just do this, and then hit the space bar, it will extend it. Okay? The space bar basically is a way of jumping things and making it longer, but it will input it. So it's not banning you from doing it in the middle of a note, but you need to press enter and then press space.
You have to hold anything.
Nope.
Or just...
No. So all you do is you just input you have to rely on some faith here. So you just input the crescendo. It's not put it there because it doesn't know where to end it, and just press space bar and it will put it in a certain place. That's one of the slightly irritating things, I think, is the placement of dynamics. And again, it started doing this weird thing where if you want to add a dynamic onto the beginning of a crescendo, it puts it at the end for some reason. But someone in the Dorico Facebook group said they were looking at it, so hopefully they'll fix it. Okay. Is there anything on that piano score you want me to try out?
Can you just repeat that space thing with the crescendo?
Okay. So if you want to add one that doesn't start, this is probably more applicable for like wind and brass instruments. Obviously, it makes no sense really having it here on a piano, except I guess you have left hand. So you just input the crescendo as normal, but it won't show up. And if you press the space bar, it will appear magically. Same thing applies for diminuendos as well. They're just hairpins.
Another workaround I've been using that might be helpful to people, I don't know if it is,
Yeah.
the spacebar thing. It's pretty nifty.
Yeah.
If you go along to the space where you want your dynamic to start, you can press U, which splits the note.
Yeah, exactly.
And you can select just the note you want it on and then retype it.
Yeah, exactly. So that's one other way of doing it. So one thing you can do in Dorico as well, you can split notes. So for example, if you want to split this into two notes like there, you can then add the crescendo like that and then retie them.
Just U.
U, yeah.
Also the scissors icon down. So.
Yeah, if you ever start using it, if you ever start using Dorico, print out a bunch of the shortcuts, because you can get a shortcut chart and just stick it on the wall behind your computer.
Which is under help key commands. I googled.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think that's pretty much everything for that one. What I also do as well with the font for the bar numbers is, I think it's paragraph starts, isn't it? Yeah. I go to library. This Zoom thing is in the way. And do that. I go to library and paragraph styles, and I actually change the bar numbers to just medium, so not italic anymore. But that's just taste, basically. And you'll see that they become not italic.
Yeah, or Shift N will do the same thing.
Yeah, Shift N or Enter.
Enter will also, if you've selected like a dynamic or something, like, does Shift N then open up the popover again? Because Enter will reopen the pop-up. Like if you press Enter on the piano, it will bring up the pop-up rather than putting you into no input. So Shift N is quite handy.
Yeah.
Nice.
So if you press Enter, it will enter on whichever thing you've got selected. So if it's nothing, it'll just put you in no input mode. But if you do it on a dynamic, it will go into the dynamic popover. There are a bunch of other popovers. All of these require the use of the Shift button. So there's also Shift O, which is ornamentation, which is like, for example, trills. There's Shift P, which is playing techniques, for example, up bow. There you go. There's also Shift H, which is breaths and pauses. What else is there? I think is there Shift
H.
There's Shift L, which is lyrics, and it also allows you to do multiple verses as well. So you can put like several lines in. So yeah, it's not going to let me do it on that because it's a rest. I think there's Shift. So Shift A gives you a rehearsal mark as well. You don't even have to specify what letter to call it. And also, if you, unlike in Sibelius, if you add a rehearsal mark and you delete one in between, it will change the last one to B, which is really, really good for classical scores. It's great, I tell you. Okay.
I don't know if the people on
yeah.
know about dynamic grouping.
Okay, dynamic grouping.
Something I fought with.
Yes, yeah, okay. I'm just going to see if there's any thing in the chat on Zoom. Whoops. Okay, yeah, nothing so far. Fine. Yeah, it's only Denali on there anyway. Okay. Yeah, so dynamic grouping, this is another thing about Dorico that you'll have to get used to, which is very different from Sibelius. You can group dynamics, and this will basically mean that they behave kind of as one unit, and also graphically will always end up being in one line. So, for example, if I have a crescendo and then a forte marking, it's actually automatically grouped them already. And if I have maybe something later on, say for example this, and then like a piano there, right? So at the moment, all of these dynamics here are not grouped together except for these two, because it's done it automatically. If you want them to be grouped together, I tend to do this basically if it's the same dynamic gesture, if it's part of the same dynamic gesture. So if for example, I have an F over here and one over here, I don't bother grouping that because it's not necessary. It doesn't help the readability at all. Probably makes it worse if anything, uses unnecessary space. But if you wanted to, for example, group this one and this one, you just select them both, or you can also do a thing where you like lasso them, like that, and then just filter out that. That's a long way of doing it. It's literally you just have to drag over an open space like that.
So
no shortcuts, no shift, no right click.
When I like select them, they select the notes above that they're like.
Exactly. So that's the problem with the lasso thing. It will select everything. If you do that, sometimes you can like then filter out and just do all dynamics, and it will just highlight the dynamic on their own.
Filter out.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, you can filter that out.
Lots of the functions don't need you to, as long as you haven't got like multiple dynamics you don't want.
Yeah. And then I go into dynamics, and you can group these. There is also a feature in dynamics, and this might be more relevant to if you've got a large ensemble piece, called linking and unlinking. And linking, what linking does is if you've got multiple instruments, it will link the dynamics of multiple instruments together. So if you edit it, for example, say if you have the brass crescendo in a unison, if you enter a crescendo from piano to mezzo forte and then decide you want to change it to forte, if you edit it to be forte in the first trumpet, it will also change it in the second trumpet, third trumpet, and all the trombones and horns, if you've linked them together. I personally hate linking dynamics together, so I have it off by default and never use it. Yeah, I can't stand it. It's annoyed me too many times, so I just turn it off. And if I want to have the same dynamic, I just write the same dynamic. If I really want to link them together, you can do that, but I have it off by default.
Do you do much with condensing, or is that
Yes.
a side thing?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's not a side thing at all. It's super useful. I'll show you condensing. So I only brought like 2 Dorico projects to show you guys. So I think this is a good one. Just get to that.
Because I've had real problems with linking dynamics and figuring out how to connect everything to get them to condense. Because if they're not properly linked, oftentimes, and it's not obvious.
Yeah,
they won't.
you actually don't have to link a dynamic for it to condense properly.
Okay.
You have to make sure it's exactly the same.
Okay.
So, so if you have linked dynamics together, and one of them is different, well, you can't link dynamics that aren't the same. But if you have 2 dynamics, the annoying thing is it sometimes can link, this is why I hate linking stuff, is it can link something to another dynamic group which doesn't have the same amount of stuff in. So for example, it can link, you can have one, let's say for example, if you've got 2 instruments crescendoing, one is crescendoing to piano and one you've just left blank. You can link the crescendo together, but they have not got the same thing. So then if you go into the full score, it will have one crescendo on the top of the stave, and then it will have one to piano because they're different, even though they have been linked. So I don't use linking at all. So for example, where it's condensed, this stuff in the flute there, you can see that's all been done.
And none of that is linked.
And none of that's linked together, I don't think. Let me just have a quick look. Okay, so one thing about orchestral scores specifically is in Dorico there are 2 main views in write mode. So there are 2 ways you can input notes. One is page view. I don't know what it's called in Sibelius, where you look at something and it's just a long line, there's no pages. I can't remember. Panoramic, yeah. So this is a similar kind of concept to panoramic view in Sibelius. Basically, you can shift to something called galley view, which will give you everything. Galley view also removes all the condensing, and it also means if you have an instrument change, Dorico basically handles instrument changes automatically. So what you'll do is you will go into setup mode, and for example, say if you had, I'm going to just ruin this piccolo part. If you had a piccolo part and you wanted to also have it doubling flute, for instance, you would just add a flute to the player, and it will become piccolo and flute 3. So the part will change to piccolo and flute 3. Now what you'll see is that in galley view, and you have to be careful when you're using this because you might accidentally end up writing for 2 instruments for 1 player. You'll see flute 3 has now appeared below the piccolo stave. It will not look like this in the page score because it's the same player. So if, for example, I want to put this back in to flute 3, so I just want it lower and put that down an octave, so it's actually playable. If I then go back to the score, so I will shift back to page views, which is Option Command 1, by the way. Option Command 2, Option Command 1. So Option Command 2 is the kind of panoramic galley view thing, and Option Command 1 is the page view. It's quite useful because you can hit both the Option and Command buttons with your thumb at the same time. Yeah. And you'll see what it's done is after piccolo, it's gone to FL, to flute. Now this is a flute here. And then after the flute, now this is obviously a completely unrealistically fast instrument change, but then it's changed it to pick. If that instrument change was over a longer period of time, you would also get a 2-pick and then pick thing, but because it's literally doing it in a beat, it doesn't bother saying 2-pick as well. And you'll see there that it's not, I've not had to hide any of the instrument at all. So I think one thing people do with instrument changes in Sibelius is they have one instrument and they hide the other one. Or you have to do a bit of a fiddly thing where it won't do it like automatically. But the way it does instrument changes is very different from other software. You just have to basically know how it's doing it, and then you can just let it do it. And if you want to change where the instrument is changed, you would go back into galley view, and you literally just change which instrument's playing it. So for example, if you wanted to put this back, and for example, if I wanted it to be more over here. So for example, say if I wanted to put this passage in to the flute 3, if I go back onto, that's obviously not playable because it's super high. But you'll see here, after the piccolo finishes playing, it says 2 FL to flute, and then it comes in here, and flute is specified at the beginning bar when it enters. I know that's not playable at all because I copied it from a piccolo. Okay, cool. Let me just undo that because it looks horrendous. I don't like it. There we go. All right, cool. Okay, now, yeah, so condensing. The good thing about condensing is it means you do not have to hide any instruments or make up any new instrument to have something condensed. So, for example, the way I've got horn 1 and 2 and horn 3 and 4 together, I've not added that A2 label or condensed it manually myself. For example, here as well, that's done it automatically. If I go ahead and turn condensing off, it is in Edit. You'll see there's this button called condensing here, which is ticked. If I untick that, it will explode everything. This is going to be a bit cramped because I designed the stave side to be for condensed score. And you'll get everything uncondensed. So all the woodwinds are separate, all the brass are separate. The strings, also the divisi that was condensed before, has been exploded back. If I go ahead and tick that again, it will condense everything back up. Okay, condensing you can customize quite heavily. So if you don't like the way it's condensed something, you can edit it. So if you go into the layout options and you find condensing, I just search for it usually, I don't even bother trying to find it. You have this enable condensing thing, which will just, it's what it says it is, it's just, do you want to condense the score or not? And then section players, you have these options here: exclude from condensing, condensed divisi, and condensed divisi and adjacent players. So basically what that is it's basically if you have, for example, a solo line in the first violin, for example, you have like maybe there's a soloist first violin, and you have the rest of the section, an adjacent player will be that. You can also exclude them. I have it on condensed divisi, which basically means if I have, for example, the first violins playing 2 different notes, but it's condensed rather than a double stop. It's divisi rather than a double stop. Then it will condense them if it can. If you've got 2 completely different things that can't be condensed, it won't. You can also exclude certain instruments from condensing. It pretty much knows what to do for the most part, but for example, I think with the trumpets it tried to condense it into one staff, and I don't really like putting 3 instruments on one staff. So I have a custom condensing group of trumpet 1 and trumpet 2. And you can do this just by pressing the plus button, and for example, if you wanted to be really dumb and condense oboe 2 and trombone 2 into one group, you could. But I wouldn't if I were you. So I have custom condensing groups of the horns too. I think it also tried to put them into 4. And for example, if you have like an orchestral, I don't think I actually have an orchestral template on Dorico, but I might make one at some point. You can have all these custom condensing groups so that no matter what you do, it will always condense them horn 1, 2, and then 3 and 4. Yeah, so the advantage of that is you don't have to do any fiddling with regards to like hiding an instrument or showing them. I'll just quickly go through the big time signatures, because that's something that you need to do for like a full orchestral film session score. So again, this is in layout options, and it is in time signatures, which are here. So you have a bunch of options here, and you basically just have to tick a bunch of them. Some of this stuff is in engrave mode, which I don't think I've shown you guys yet, but I've got it to once per bracket and narrow sans serif. Again, it doesn't really matter what, you could use a normal font if you want to. But that's only part of it. if I also go into engrave mode, there's a bunch of other options. I kind of wish these were together, but you can do it, basically, is the point. So time signatures. Here you go. So time signatures centered on brackets. So this, as you can see, I've got the time signature at the top of every bracket. So there is an option, vertical alignment relative to bracket. So if I put this in the middle, it will move those big time signatures to the middle of each bracket. So woodwind, brass, strings, perk. And you also have another option as well, which is, for example, if you have quite a lot of like auxiliary instruments like pianos and accordion or bass guitar or something that would normally sit in between your brass and strings, you can basically get Dorico to treat it as one kind of instrumental family bracket, basically. So what I do is I go ahead and press treat a single bracket. If I treated them separately, it does that. So it's treating the percussion as one bracket because I've bracketed it, right? But the timpani is treated separately and also the harp is separate, right? Which you don't really want. So you can do treat a single bracket and then just apply that, and that's how it works. Yeah, with the bar number things as well, you can decide where you want them. In this score, I decided to have them above the flute and below the double bass. You can change that if you want. So if you go into bar numbers, you can go into placement, and placement relative to system is just whether you want them at the top of the page and at the bottom. So I've ticked that I want them above the top staff. In fact, I didn't even need to click that one, I just did for it anyway. But you can ask it to show above specific players. So for example, if you wanted, a lot of recording session scores have the bar numbers also above the first violin. That can be useful in certain circumstances. So you can tick you want them above the first violin. There we go, and it's added in there. You can see that's kind of messed up my score because it doesn't have the space to do it, because I didn't do it like that to begin with. So I would have to just slightly increase the staff size there. Yeah, so you can mess around with stuff like that. Also, one useful thing is, I've got something in the chat. How does Dorico work when you're looking at individual parts from an orchestral score? Okay, right, yeah. I was about to kind of look at stuff like that. So individual parts, you can find them in this big list here. Let me just read the question again to make sure I didn't miss any of it. Creating individual parts from an orchestral score. Okay, fine, all right. So an individual part is something where a template is quite useful, but I found this one to be a big time saver compared to Sibelius, because I found the way Sibelius made parts just to be bad. Okay, let's just pick out a random one. Okay, so trumpet in B flat 2. So this is what a part looks like. I've done quite a bit of editing in this. Well, not quite a bit, only a little bit, I would say. I've actually just spotted a mistake there, which isn't good. But this is the part here at the moment. And I've not done too much really to change this. You can see that it automatically knows not to put any of the instrument name on the left here. I do want to show cues actually. I think this is probably one of the best things about Dorico is the way it handles cues. Sibelius is much more inferior when it comes to cues. So you can see I've put a frame break here. A frame break is just telling the software I want you to put this bar on the next page, basically. So if I delete this, you'll see it puts it basically to fit as much music as possible. I thought, well, if I'm going to have 2 pages, I might as well space it out. A frame break, by the way, frame breaks and system breaks you do in engrave mode. So this is one advantage of Dorico, is it basically will split up your different tasks into different modes. So it's quite common, I find, if you're in Sibelius trying to fix like a crescendo, you accidentally change a note, or you accidentally change where the instrument the crescendo's in, or how long it is. Engrave mode is strictly for engraving. It will only allow you to make cosmetic changes to the score. It will not allow you to input notes. It will not allow you to change the instruments or however many beats are in a bar, for example. So for example, the good thing is it gives you flexibility, and If you move something in engrave mode, it will not move other things to accommodate for that unless you tell it to. So one thing that's a bit irritating I find about Sibelius is sometimes if you move a certain object, it will move a whole other bunch of things around to try and accommodate you moving it. I can move this bar 15 thing and put it on the staff and it won't do anything. Right, I know that's dumb, but for example, if you wanted to move this tempo marking to be a bit closer to the staff, you can do that and it won't decide it needs to move anything around it. Let's say this trombone 1 label, I think it's fine where it is, but if you wanted to move it there, for example, you see it's not moving anything, it's not moving the clef, it's not adding a system break for no reason. So if you want to make very specific changes to your part or even the score, it's quite useful like for that sort of thing. Cues, let me do cues quickly. Okay, right, let's go to write mode. So cues you do in write mode, okay. At the moment you see I've got a cue for trombone 1 there. On Sibelius I think you have to copy a part and do then paste as cue. This is irritating for a bunch of reasons. If you then go ahead and change the notes that are in the cue, you then have to delete the original cue and add it back again. And also it tends to make a bit of a pig's ear of adding the rests in. So obviously when you have a cue, it's basically what it's doing is making a small second voice. So you still have to have the rests in the original part in. So if I delete that cue, the cue popper is Shift U. So it's this one. And then all you do is you type the name of the instrument you want to hear the cue from. So I think I had trombone 1. Okay. And you see it's added trombone 1. It's got a little dot there. And that is for where the end of the cue would be. And all you have to do is you have to just drag that to where you want the cue to end. So you could, if you wanted to, you could have a cue keep going into where they're actually playing. That's a very bad idea. So I tend to just stop it on the bar before the instrument needs to come in, basically. And you'll see it's added the instrument label as well. And it's also done the rests automatically, which is lovely. Sometimes in Sibelius, you have to do a whole lot of work to get the rests to look like they're in the right place. I think you can also, if I'm not mistaken, you can also, and I don't even tend to use any of this, you can also change a bunch of stuff in the cue. For example, if you want, I think you can also change some of this in the layout or engrave mode. But for example, if you don't want your cues to have any of the articulation markings in, you can change that. If you want to include the dynamics, for example there, it's added them in. Again, this is one of those ones where I don't know why they have to have 2 tick boxes, but anyway, you can do it. Yeah, and then also with recording session scores, I tend to not allow it to condense the rests together. So normally this would have like a big 6-bar group of rests and then another one up until the tempo change. And you can do this quite easily. It's just in bar rests and multi-bar rests. So show bar rests in empty bars. All that will do, sometimes you might want to, if you have an empty bar, not even have a rest at all. I don't know why exactly, but some people prefer that. This is the key thing, consolidate here. And consolidate basically will, this is quite useful for, in fact it's the default mode of Dorico, but if you want to show every single bar, regardless of whether there's any notes in it, you just press don't consolidate, so none. If I put multi-bar rests, you see it immediately consolidates all this and it puts 9, 6, etc. I think the reason this is useful for recording sessions is if you say we're going to go from bar 5, for example. Also, one thing is it means that the players don't have to count any bars in a multi-bar rest. And it means they don't have to count across the system. For example, usually in a classical score, you'll only have 1 bar number at the beginning of the system. And if you are playing something that's like 4 bars into the system, you have to count that. And that is a little bit of time that, you know, everyone can count wrong sometimes. I've done it myself many times as a trumpet player. If someone comes in the wrong place, that's a take you can't use. I also think it's quite useful for an instrumentalist visually. If you say we're going from bar 11, they can look at every single bar and count it in their head, rather than trying to do it on their fingers or in their head. It's just a time saver, I think. You know, in recording sessions, you're not trying to save paper, you're trying to save money. And money is time. So the more time you can save in a recording session, the better. Yeah, so that's how it does parts. Again, I haven't really done too much to this. I've added like one manual system break in here, I think. The reason for that is because this was a bit too close, so I just added system breaks in there. One thing to also think about as well is the vertical justification. And what I mean by that is sometimes if you have only like two staffs or like if you only have like maybe 80 or 70% of a staff of a page, full, it will not put the bottom staff at the bottom. It will kind of leave it up there and it will kind of cram everything higher up. What I tend to do is I tend to have my vertical justification numbers on about 40%. So if 40% of the page is full, it will spread it automatically throughout the entire page. I think that pretty much covers parts, but the good thing about this is you don't end up with the condensed mode, you don't end up with like a fake trumpet 1 and 2 part, which you would never give to an instrumentalist. The trumpet 1 and 2 parts are automatically being condensed in the full score. There we go. So it's there. One thing that was actually really useful with Dorico as well is you can make multiple layouts, you can make multiple full scores. So this score I actually striped the recording. So I did the brass and the winds and strings all separately on different days. And rather than having to make a new Dorico project for the brass score or the wind score, you can actually make a different score. So if I go in setup here, what I did is I just added, you can go down here in setup mode and you can add a full score layout. So that will just give you all like the parameters of a full score, but you can specify which instruments. So if I go into full score here, you'll see that all the instruments are ticked, because in the full score I want all the instruments there, obviously. If I go into the brass score here, you'll see that I only have horn, trumpet, trombone, and tuba. And this is, again, it's functioning as a full score layout, but what it means is that I can have a separate brass score in the same project. And if I go ahead, for example, and I edit something here, let's say I had a bunch of random notes in the tuba, right? If I then go back onto the full score, they're there, right? So you can make, if you want, for example, if you have something that's striped, you can make multiple scores. This was really useful for me, just very quick and easy to make these separate scores, because you can have strings as well as here. And then there's also woodwind. I don't think I made one, I didn't make one for percussion for this because I wasn't recording it, so I didn't bother. But, and all of these page breaks and like cues are not going to affect what goes on in the actual full score. So yeah, so how it does orchestral stuff, there's a lot to kind of unpack, there's a lot of menus to kind of go through. But again, if you have a template, 95% of the work will be done for you already. And you can pretty much, yeah, just do it. Is there any questions? Yeah, go on.
A short question about
Yeah.
parts. So,
Yeah.
like the bar number changes, the formatting changes done in the full score doesn't apply to the part for me right now. I don't know if there's a...
Correct, yeah. So if you go into layout options here, you'll see that actually it shows you all the parts down there, right? So if you wanted to, so by default we'll put all the score layouts at the top there. You can change options on multiple of these parts or scores at once. If something is got a dash in it, that means on the layouts you have different options selected. So for example, show below bottom stuff on system, I don't think I had that ticked for the brass score, but I did for the full score, which is why it's showing a dash there. If you want to change that bar number thing for all of the parts, you just will go ahead and you can also do this like this. You can select all the part layouts, which will select all of the, a layout, by the way, is just basically what you would give to a player or a conductor. That's what a layout is. So it's separate from an instrument. So there are some of these like terminologies which are slightly bizarre, but if you know what they mean, it makes sense. You can select all the scores or the parts. So for example, with the bar numbers, I pretty much have the same thing selected, but for example, for the parts, if you wanted to, for whatever reason, have the bar numbers centered on a bar line instead, and you just click apply. Let's close that. Use my mouse. That's why I brought it. And like if I go on over 2, you'll see it's done that. It's just putting them at the start, or it's at the center of every bar. And if I undo that, you'll see, sorry, one thing. If I go into another part, you'll see it's done the same thing for all of them. And then if I undo that, it will just undo the whole lot, right? So yeah, and also you can have different. There are certain things where you can change the font size and the just everything about the font for each one. So for example, the bar numbers in the parts and score, I have the bar numbers in the score at a much bigger font size. In parts, they don't need to be so big. So there are certain things like bar numbers, and I think like writs and rows that you can have like custom sizes for, and it will not. What I'm trying to say, it will not affect the full score if you change them. Yeah, so that's how it does orchestral stuff, which I think is probably a pretty good selling point of it, actually. Well, just one other thing to say is, again, this is kind of to stop humans making stupid human mistakes, which is if something is condensed. For example, this, I've got 2 notes in the viola, but they're not double stopped. It's a divisi, and it's condensed as well. I can't write onto this in the page view. I can in the galley view. Option Command 2. There it is. And you'll see it's all spread out, and that's where you would do your writing, basically. Galley view is kind of where you would do your writing if you're doing a full orchestral score, really, because on the page layout, you want to use that basically just for engraving, pretty much. I don't really use it for anything else. So actually, I usually have the right mode on galley view, because then you're not having to worry about like pages. You can just focus on writing music rather than page turns and condensing and all that. You can worry about that at the end. Anything else? I think that, yeah, go on.
How on earth did you do front pages?
Front pages, okay.
Yeah.
Right, so yeah, front pages. For this one, actually, I might pull up, actually, no, I'll stick with this. Okay, so front pages, I will show you. Front pages are done primarily in engrave mode. Okay, so usually what I would do is I would add a blank page and then customize it. In fact, what I might do is I'm going to pull up a concert music score because I think it's a bit more relevant for that. Let's see, have I got anything? Okay, so this is a concert piece. The reason I'm showing you a concert piece is because for recording sessions, usually you don't have a cover page because it's not being published anyway. Okay. For my concert music, I have a template for this. So if I look at the full score, this is, by the way, like a brass deck 10-piece brass ensemble. And if I go into engrave mode here, you can see all these pages, right? So if I just go ahead and kind of reset this to the kind of default. Okay, so this is what it will look like by default for me. So I've just got the opening page there and no title page. If I go into engrave mode and I select page 1, you can then change what page 1 is for, basically. So what I do is I go to right click and I have some like page templates here. So these page templates look like that. So this is a title page template. So I have the layout name, which is full score, trumpet 1, cornet 7, whatever. The composer, which is usually me, sometimes it's not. The title of the music, the subtitle, and then any copyright information. And then this is just basically an extra bit of copyright information at the bottom that I've just put there because I want to. I also have a template for the first page of a project. So you have the layout name, the dedication, if there is one. So that usually if you've got like commission information, it'll be there. The title or subtitle and the lyricist if there is one, and then the composer. And then this blue box here is music. That's a music frame. And you can change any of this with the insert frame thing. So if you, for example, if you wanted to add some text there, you can just go ahead and do that. Okay, close. So what I would do is I would add, and I actually need to update my template to do more of this automatically, but you just insert a template change here, and I have a template for the title page. So I just go ahead and tick that, and you'll see page 1 becomes a title page now. And for this, I tend to not put the copyright information on the front cover, I tend to put it on the inner cover. So I'll just delete that. Okay. For the second page, I usually have this as a blank one, and I maybe put the instrumental information in there. So you just go insert pages, and you can say just no page template, and it will just make a blank page. And then page 3, it's just kept it as the first page, but if you have a different template, you can change it. So yeah, again, it's not changed it because I haven't asked it to. But that's how you make a title page. For parts, you can do the same thing. So for parts, I don't tend to have a blank second page. I just go straight onto the music, so it's like just a double spread. And again, this is quite easy. So you can see I've got these green lines here on engrave mode. These are template changes. So if I remove these, it will just give you that, right? Which again is usable, but I wanted a title page. So what I do is I change page 1. You don't insert a page, you just change what the template does. So you do insert page template change, title page part. Okay, now you can see here, it's not put like the title or anything. And that's because I changed the template to not have it. So if I just go insert template change and I put first, then it will make this like look like a first page with the title and the part and everything. Yeah, that's how to make a title page. And you can also add in graphics to this. So if you wanted a picture, you can do that. Yeah. Anything else? Crash course. I like it. Let me delete that. Okay, cool. Let me just check there's nothing else coming from the chat. Nope.
So, wait. I remember there were times when I inputted my MIDI files into it automatically, and the template turned out really weird. So, the way that you solved it, is it just by purely copy pasting everything to your original template? Or...
How do you mean? Do you mean all the instruments are all messed up and everything?
No, I think just the page formatting when there are just really few instruments. I don't remember what happened now.
You'd have to send me the project.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, with stuff like that, there's nothing you can't fix, basically. So if, for example, it's not displaying enough instruments on one page, it's probably something to do with the staff size or there'll be some parameter that it's not done properly somewhere. If you're using Logic and then going into Dorico, what I found is, I don't know if it's just on the Logic MIDI export, but it treats every MIDI region as a new instrument. So what I do before I export the MIDI is I just combine all of the regions across the entire thing, just so it stays on one staff.
I also find it helps to be careful about what you name your Logic tracks, and then also name your regions by tracks, because sometimes I move things around, and in the MIDI cleanup stage,
it's confusing.
Yeah,
and sometimes what I've done actually occasionally is, if I have a template for something already, I will actually open the MIDI file in a new Dorico project, and I will actually do the MIDI cleanup in a separate project first, and then just paste all of the music onto a new one. You have to be careful doing that to not miss anything out, but I have done that sometimes. If you, for example, have like a complex orchestral score, and you already have a template for it all, so it's set up with all the condensing and all the pages and everything like that. You just you have one Dorico project where you just do all the MIDI cleaning up, just for basically getting rid of all the excess voices if you've got stems going up and down in the wrong place or note lengths that aren't right. I fix all that, save that project, and I opened the actual template, and then I will just basically import the tempo map and delete all of but not any of the actual instruments. And then I will just copy across the cleaned up MIDI into that. It's one way of doing it. It's not, I don't even know if it even made anything faster for me, but you can do that. Yeah, I think that's pretty much everything. Any more questions? Yeah.
Pedal lines?
Pedal line. Oh my god, I forgot to show you pedal lines. Crap. I was going to show you that. Right, let me close this. Definitely don't save. Okay, pedal lines. Okay, this is something that's actually really good as well. So Shift P, you always do this on the left hand. So Shift P is the playing techniques popover, and that is for things like up bows, down bows, mutes, consort, flutter tone, and also for pedal. So if I select a range of notes that I want the pedal over, I just do Shift P, and then you can just type in ped, just the word ped.
Lovely. So it's basically like type the terms.
Yeah, usually, yeah. Or sometimes you type a little, like, one character that's the symbol or something. I've got 2 beautifully clean bars of music there, and then nothing else is nice after that. But yeah, so you just enter ped, and then you just press enter, and it would add a pedal line for you. You can extend this pedal line however you want, so you can just drag it. And if you want to retake, you do the same thing, but you type the word retake. Like that. And you can also, if you want to delete a retake, you just right click, go on pedal lines, and you do remove retake. Yeah, that's what you call it. Yeah, it's a retake. Yep, you retake the pedal. Yeah, and also if you add a retake in one place, my emoji keyboard's just come up, go away, and you then extend or contract the pedal line, it does not affect it unless you go over it and get rid of it like that. You can also change what the pedal line looks like in the properties panel. So, for example, you can go to the line end hook. You might want like I don't know why you would want to change this, but you can do random stuff like this. Continuation type, you see there's a sign at the end, you can change it to that if you want. For example, if you have a long passage where you want the pedal to be held down, you don't want to put a whole big fat line across the entire system, you can just do this. There's also that one. You can change the appearance of the sign. For example, that. Yeah, I tend to just leave it on the default. It's P on its own. I've never seen that in a score before.
I've never seen that.
Yeah, and that's, I really would not want to put that in a recording session score. Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's pedal lines. And in engrave mode, you can move these manually without. So, for example, sometimes I've had like. I quite like the pedal lines, kind of like dynamics, to be all and the tempo markings to all be like in one place across the system. So if I put it here and also here, you see this one's quite a bit lower down. Sometimes I like to just make them in the same place. So I'm just going to go into engrave mode. I'm just going to move it. And the good thing is it has these guidelines. You see that dotted line there, where you can make sure that it is exactly in the same place. And then you have them it's I think a bit neater if you do it like that. But that's an engrave mode thing. And the good thing about that is it's not going to affect. It doesn't actually let you move them to a different. It doesn't let me move this anywhere else, right? It's keeping it attached to that bar. And you can also, if you want, do weird stuff. Right, if you want, for example, if there's like say there was a dynamic in the left hand that was making it clash, you could move it a bit, or you can move it down. You can also move where a retake is visually without affecting the score itself. Yeah. And by the way, anything that's in that you change in a properties panel, there are these two options called locally and globally. Locally will only change something in the current layout you're in. So if you change, for example, if I change the pedal marking in a piano part and only have it on local, if I go into the full score, if this was an ensemble, the pedal marking would not be affected by that. There are instances where you want to use one or the other. So for example, if I move a tempo marking, let's say a writ, up or down graphically, I don't want that to go and change it in every part, because sometimes in Dorico they're not on one line automatically, so you have to manually move it downwards. But if you set that to global, then it will F up everything in all the other parts, because it will not keep it on one line. So that's when you want to be really careful if you've got properties and you're changing them, make sure you set it to local or global, whichever one you want. So global will change it in everything, local will only change it on the current layout you're on. Yeah, that's pedal lines. Any other things you want to run through? I don't mind. Any if anything pops up in your head, feel free to shoot me a message, or go on, or descend onto the Dorico Facebook group and go, what the hell's going on? How do I change this? Yeah. All right, cool. If you were watching the recording of this, hope it was useful and not too complicated. It probably was too complicated, but yeah, never mind. Cool, and I will see you hopefully on Friday.